So what do we know now that we didn't know last week? Well, we know the institutional pathologies of lack of accountability, bureaucratic buck passing, and craven disregard for basic moral responsibility to protect children are not limited to the Catholic Church. We know that cultures that nurture a shared sense that the people who run the institution are more important than anything else in the world are petri dishes for corruption and for evil. After Karl Rove's Crossroads GPS came out with a silly red baiting ad aimed at Elizabeth Warren, we now know that the plutocracy is geared up to do whatever it takes to destroy the Massachusetts Senate candidate. We do not know just how much 50-year-old red baiting tropes will resonate with today's voters. We now know definitively that Rick Perry is not a very good debater, and we also know, more disturbingly, the Republican candidates seem to be engaged in a bidding war over who wants to get rid of the most federal agencies without a particularly good specific case for why they want to do it. We now know that several years into an extended crisis of authority, students are beginning to actively fight back in Occupy campus protests across the country. So maybe we will soon have an answer to a question I've heard from so many people of my parents' generation: why aren't you in the streets? We now know that Silvio Berlusconi, Prime Minister of Italy, is stepping down as Prime Minister. And we know that though there is extremely stiff competition, he may just be the single worst, most corrupt Western leader of his generation. We also now know the story of Berlusconi, Italy's wealthiest man and most powerful media owner, retaining control of the state for most of the last decade, is a chilling fable about the end result of extreme inequality and concentration of power. Thanks to a new statewide poll from the Morrison Institute for Public Policy, we now know that the much maligned voters of Arizona actually support a path of legalization for the country's undocumented immigrants. According to the poll, even 69% of Republicans support so-called earned legalization if a number of conditions are met. We don't know if our political culture is able to nurture our basic sensible decency into humane and decent policy. With new data out from Realty Track this week, we now know that U.S. foreclosure activity hit a 7-month high in October, up 7% from the previous month. We also know that our political system continues to be shamefully incapable of taking the necessary steps to rectify the situation by imposing some form of debt principal forgiveness. And finally, we now know there is no issue too small or too stupid for conservatives to fire up the outrage machine over. A promotional program for Christmas trees created by the Christmas tree industry and the Department of Agriculture was put on hold when conservatives such as the Heritage Foundation's David Addington attacked the revenue mechanism for funding the program as a, quote, Christmas tree tax. Addington, you'll remember, was Dick Cheney's chief of staff, a position he used to repeatedly and forcefully argue for illegal spying on Americans and torture of detainees. We know that for Addington, his cushy sinecure at the Heritage Foundation is a far less appropriate place than sitting before an international criminal court would be. That would be a Christmas present worth paying a tax for. So what do my guests know now they didn't know when the week began? We'll find out after this. Penn State. All right, Rick Hertzberger, what do you now know you didn't know at the beginning of the week?
Well, I've noticed that while everybody's happy to blow the whistle on Rick Perry for having a senior moment, I'm still waiting for the rest of these Republican candidates to blow the whistle on him for wanting to abolish, for example, a cabinet department established by Theodore Roosevelt that includes the Weather Bureau and the Patent Office, two rather non-wasteful functions of government.
This is the Commerce Department, I believe you're referring to, yes. The Patent Office seems like an important thing.
Yeah, that's been around a while, too.
For American capitalism, particularly. Victoria De Francesco Soto, what do you now know that you did not know at the beginning of the week?
Well, earlier this week, a poll by Univision and Latino Decisions was released, and here, you know, I thought that the trend of Latinos becoming more socially progressive was starting, but it really blew up in my face when I saw that in the 18 to 35 demographic, close to 70% of Latinos support gay marriage, not just civil unions, but gay marriage. So I think this is going to be interesting for the potential coalitions between LGBT and Latinos going into future elections.
And we talked earlier in the show, you referred to the poll, the numbers for Latinos overall, across all age demographics. Overall. You said support for gay marriage is larger in this poll than the general public, exactly. Which I think does defy a lot of the conventional wisdom about Latino voters. Elizabeth Holtzman, what do you now know you didn't know at the beginning of the week?
Well, that some of the same problems that arose with regard to false statements leading us into the Iraq War are still with us. The UN report on The UN recent report on Iran and its possible making of nuclear weapons relies on some information that's highly questionable. Now, Christian Science Monitor reported that this so-called Russian scientist,
who's the source for some of the
right, has been teaching the Iranians how to build nuclear weapons, apparently is in the business of nano diamond making, which is itty-bitty diamonds. And you make them with explosives too, and so this van, mysterious van, may be for making nano diamonds.
So it's possible that the work that he was doing with the Iranians was not related to nuclear
at all.
weaponry.
It's possible, and this is now in several important newspapers, and so.
Michael Eric Dyson, what do you now know that you did not know at the beginning of the week?
Well, Herman Cain may or may not be guilty of the charges of sexual harassment that have been, I think, powerfully levied against him, but we do know he's grossly insensitive by making a joke about Anita Hill. I mean, this shows the kind of egregious, outrageous insensitivity toward the issues of women more broadly that ought to concern not only the Republican Party, but all of America.
My thanks to Rick Hertzberg of the New Yorker magazine, Victoria DeFrancesco Soto from the University of Texas, Austin, former Brooklyn District Attorney Elizabeth Holtzman, and MSNBC political analyst Michael Eric Dyson. You guys were great. Thank you. Thank you for